I didn't marry him for love, I married him to make him remember. The cathedral smelled like white roses and money, the kind of money that didn't just buy flowers but bought silence, loyalty, and entire lives rewritten in ink that never faded. My heels echoed against the marble floor as I walked down the aisle, each step measured, each breath controlled, like I had practiced this moment 1,000 times in my head. Because I had. The veil brushed softly against my lips when I exhaled, a thin barrier between me and the man waiting at the altar, the man everyone feared but no one dared to look at for too long. Victor Hale. 65 years old. The king of a city that pretended it didn't belong to him. I could feel his presence before I ever saw his face, like a shift in the air pressure, like the room itself had learned to bend around him. People didn't whisper when he entered. They simply stopped talking. The music continued, soft and distant, but it felt like it was coming from another world, a world that still believed in weddings as something pure. Not this one. Not ours. This was a transaction wrapped in silk and vows, signed long before I ever put on this dress. They said my family owed him more than we could ever repay. They said this marriage would settle everything. They were wrong. My fingers tightened slightly around the bouquet, white petals pressing against my palm, grounding me, reminding me why I was here. I didn't look up as I reached the end of the aisle. I didn't need to. I already knew what he looked like. Or at least, I knew the version of him the world saw. The tailored black suit. The silver at his temples. The eyes that missed nothing and forgave even less. I stopped when the priest nodded, his voice distant as he began the ceremony, words about unity and devotion that felt almost ironic under the weight of everything unsaid. I kept my head slightly lowered, letting the veil hide my expression, letting them all believe I was nervous, overwhelmed, just another young bride standing beside a man far older and far more powerful. That part, at least, was true. But fear wasn't what made my heart beat faster. It was anticipation. I could feel his gaze on me now, steady, calculating, as if he were trying to read through the fabric covering my face, trying to understand the woman he had just agreed to marry. He didn't know. Not yet. The priest's voice continued, steady and rehearsed, until it reached the moment I had been waiting for. You may lift the veil. Time didn't stop. It slowed. I felt it in the way my breath caught just slightly, in the way the room seemed to lean in without realizing it. His hand moved. Slow. Controlled. The hand of a man who had never rushed for anything in his life. His fingers brushed the edge of the veil, and for a second, just one, I wondered if he would recognize me before it even lifted. But he didn't. Of course he didn't. Not yet. The fabric rose, inch by inch, and the light shifted across my face as the world finally saw me clearly. I lifted my eyes to meet his. And that was the moment everything changed. For a moment, he did not breathe. I saw it in the slight pause of his chest, in the way his fingers stilled against the edge of the veil as if they had forgotten what they were meant to do. Victor Hale did not hesitate. Men like him did not freeze. But he did now. And that was how I knew. His eyes locked onto mine, searching, scanning, calculating, but beneath all of that was something else, something raw and unguarded that flickered for just a second too long. Recognition does not always come like a lightning strike. Sometimes it creeps in, quiet and unwelcome, like a memory you tried to bury but never quite erased. I held his gaze without blinking. I did not smile. I did not look away. I wanted him to feel it, that subtle shift in control, that moment where the world he had built so carefully no longer followed his rules. Around us, the ceremony continued as if nothing had happened. The priest spoke, the guests watched, the music played softly in the background, but none of it mattered. The only thing that existed was the space between us, charged and fragile, like glass just before it cracks. His hand finally dropped from the veil, slow and deliberate, but I noticed the way his fingers curled slightly, as if he were holding onto something invisible. Emily Carter, he repeated under his breath, my name no longer just a formality on a contract, but a question he had not yet asked out loud. I tilted my head just slightly, enough to let the light catch my face fully, enough to remove any doubt that might still be hiding in the corners of his mind. I watched the moment it hit him harder, not as a full memory, but as a fragment. A pair of eyes. A voice. A night that refused to stay in the past. He did not speak again, but his silence said everything. People think power is loud. They think it is control, commands, decisions made without hesitation. They are wrong. Real power is in the moments when everything inside you shifts, and you still manage to stand still. Victor Hale stood perfectly still. But his eyes betrayed him. The priest's voice grew clearer again, cutting through the tension neither of us acknowledged. Words about vows, about commitment, about a future that was supposed to begin today. I almost laughed at that. A future. This was not a beginning. This was a return. His gaze flickered, just for a second, down to my hands, to the small detail most people would never notice. The ring I wore before this ceremony had even started. Simple. Silver. Worn thin by time. It did not belong with the rest of this carefully constructed image. It did not belong in his world. But it belonged to mine. And I knew he saw it. I saw the question form before he could stop it. Where did you get that? He did not ask it. Not yet. But he would. Because men like Victor Hale needed answers. They needed control. And I had just taken both away from him without saying a single word. The priest turned to him then, waiting, expecting the next part of the ceremony, expecting him to speak the words that would seal everything in place. Victor did not move immediately. His jaw tightened, just slightly, the only visible crack in the composed mask he had worn for decades. Then, slowly, he looked back at me, deeper this time, as if he were no longer seeing the woman in front of him, but the shadow of someone else standing behind my eyes. I leaned in just enough for only him to hear me, my voice barely above a whisper, steady and calm. Do you remember now? His expression did not change immediately, and that was the most dangerous part. Victor Hale had spent decades mastering control, building a face the world could never read, but I was not the world. I was the exception he had forgotten to account for. His eyes stayed on mine, unblinking now, sharper, colder, as if he were peeling back layers, searching for the truth hidden beneath my skin. The silence between us stretched just a second too long, long enough for the air to tighten, long enough for the weight of my question to settle where it could not be ignored. Do you remember now? I saw it then, not fully formed, not complete, but enough. A flicker. A crack. A moment where the past slipped through the present and refused to be pushed back down. His jaw shifted, almost imperceptibly, and his voice, when it came, was lower than before, quieter, but carrying something new beneath it. Should I? It was not denial. It was not acceptance. It was something in between, the kind of answer a man gives when he knows the truth is close, but he is not ready to let it surface. I let a small breath escape, steady, controlled, my lips barely moving as I answered, you used to be better at remembering the people who mattered. The words landed softly, but I watched the impact ripple through him, subtle but undeniable. Around us, the ceremony pressed forward, unaware or unwilling to acknowledge the fracture forming at the center of it. A few guests shifted in their seats, sensing something off, though they could not name it. The priest cleared his throat, gently guiding us back to the script, to the part where Victor was expected to speak his vows. He did not. Not right away. Instead, his gaze dropped again, slower this time, more deliberate, drawn back to my hand, to the thin silver ring resting against my finger like a memory that refused to fade. His focus lingered there longer than before, and I knew he was trying to place it, trying to connect something buried deep in a part of his mind he rarely visited. I lifted my hand slightly, just enough for the light to catch it, just enough to make sure he could. Not look away. You gave this to someone once, I said softly, my voice still only for him, still hidden beneath the illusion of ceremony. You said it meant something. His eyes snapped back to mine, faster this time, and there it was again, stronger now, sharper, closer to the surface. Not just recognition. Realization. But realization without context is dangerous. It makes men like him unstable. It makes them unpredictable. And that was exactly where I needed him. His fingers twitched at his side, a small, involuntary movement, as if part of him wanted to reach out, to take my hand, to confirm what his mind was beginning to piece together. But he did not move. He never moved without purpose. And right now, he did not have one. The priest spoke again, louder this time, gently insistent, calling him back to the moment everyone else believed we were sharing. Sir, your vows. Victor finally shifted, just slightly, enough to acknowledge the room again, enough to remind everyone that he was still in control. But when he looked at me again, I knew something had changed. The distance was gone. The calculation was still there, but now it was mixed with something else. Something heavier. Something personal. I leaned closer once more, my voice calm, unwavering, as I gave him the final piece he needed. You promised her you would never forget. I paused, letting the words settle, letting them reach the place in him he had spent years avoiding. Then I whispered, softer this time, but clearer than anything else I had said. I am her daughter. The words did not echo. They sank straight into him. I watched it happen in real time, the exact second Victor Hale stopped being the man everyone else saw and became something far more human, far more fragile, even if only for a breath. His pupils tightened, just slightly, and the color drained from his face in a way no one else in that room would dare notice. But I did. I had spent years imagining this moment, replaying it, reshaping it, wondering if it would feel like victory or emptiness. It felt like neither. It felt like standing on the edge of something irreversible. That is not possible, he said quietly, but there was no conviction behind it, no authority, no command. Just a man trying to reject a truth that had already found its way inside him. I tilted my head slightly, studying him the way he used to study everyone else, calm, patient, waiting for the truth to reveal itself without force. You always say that when you do not want something to be real, I replied, my voice steady, almost gentle, which somehow made it worse. His gaze sharpened again, not with power this time, but with urgency, scanning my face like he was trying to map it onto something buried deep in his memory. A younger version. A softer one. Someone he had once looked at differently. I could see the connections forming now, incomplete but undeniable. The shape of my eyes. The way I held his gaze without fear. The ring. Always the ring. His attention dropped to it again, longer this time, and I knew exactly where his mind was going. Back to a time he had carefully sealed away, labeled and locked, never meant to be opened again. The priest spoke once more, his tone more insistent now, trying to pull us back into the ceremony, back into something structured and predictable. Sir, do you take this woman? The words faded into the background as Victor did something no one in that room expected. He did not answer. Not yet. Instead, he took a slow breath, the kind of breath that does not belong to a man in control, but to someone trying to regain it. When he finally spoke again, his voice had changed. Still low. Still controlled. But beneath it was something unfamiliar. Something personal. What was her name? The question was quiet, almost careful, like he was afraid of the answer before it even came. I did not hesitate. I had carried that name with me my entire life. Claire, I said, and for the first time, I felt my own voice shift, just slightly, just enough to remind myself that this was not just a plan, not just a mission. This was real. His reaction was not immediate, but it was deeper. Slower. Like a wave that starts far out and builds before it reaches the shore. His eyes closed for half a second, and when they opened again, something inside him had moved. Not broken. Not yet. But moved. Claire, he repeated, softer now, like the name had weight, like it had history he could no longer ignore. Around us, the room was beginning to change. People were noticing now. Not the words, not the truth, but the disruption. The hesitation. The fact that Victor Hale, the man who never faltered, was standing at the altar without giving his answer. A ripple of quiet uncertainty spread through the guests, subtle but growing. I leaned closer, closing the distance just enough to make sure only he could hear what came next. You told her once that some promises do not disappear, I whispered, my breath steady, my eyes never leaving his. You just choose not to look at them. His jaw tightened again, but this time it was not restraint. It was recognition. Not complete. Not clean. But enough to hurt. Enough to matter. And that was when I saw it, clear and undeniable. Not fear. Not yet. But something far more dangerous for a man like him. Regret. Regret did not suit him. It sat wrong on his face, like a shadow that did not belong to the shape of the man everyone knew. Victor Hale was built on certainty, on decisions that never looked back, and yet here he was, standing in front of an altar, staring at me like the past had just rewritten itself in front of him. The room was no longer quiet. It was restless. Subtle shifts. Soft whispers. People adjusting in their seats, trying to understand why the ceremony had stalled, why the man who controlled everything had not yet spoken the simplest word. Yes. I could feel their confusion like a distant hum, but it did not reach me. Nothing reached me except him. His eyes had not left mine, not since I said her name. Claire. It lingered between us now, heavier than any vow the priest could have asked him to make. You should not be here, he said finally, his voice low, controlled again, but thinner now, like something underneath it had been stripped away. I almost smiled. Not because it was funny. Because it was predictable. And yet, I answered softly, here I am. His jaw tightened, the old version of him pushing forward, the one that solved problems, that corrected what did not belong. This marriage was arranged, he said, more to himself than to me, as if repeating it would make it solid again. Your family agreed. I nodded slightly. They did. I let the words sit there for a second before adding, they thought they were settling a debt. His gaze sharpened at that, a flicker of the man he used to be returning, searching for control in something he understood. Thought, he repeated. I lifted my chin just enough to meet him at his height, to remove the last illusion of imbalance between us. I agreed for a different reason. Silence again. But this time, it was not fragile. It was deliberate. I could see him recalculating, shifting pieces in his mind, trying to understand the move he had missed. Men like him did not like surprises. They especially did not like being part of someone else's plan. The priest stepped forward, hesitant now, unsure whether to continue or stop, his voice uncertain as he tried once more. Sir, your answer. Victor did not look at him. He did not look at anyone else in the room. Only me. Always me now. What do you want? He asked, and that question was different from everything that came before. It was not a demand. It was not a command. It was the first honest question he had asked me. I took a slow breath, feeling the weight of it settle in my chest, the years behind it, the reason I had walked down that aisle in the first place. I could have said revenge. I could have said justice. I could have said everything he had taken. But the truth was simpler. I want you to remember, I said. His expression did not change immediately, but something in his eyes did. A shift. A deeper understanding of what this really was. Not a transaction. Not a mistake. A reckoning. The word hung unspoken between us, but I knew he felt it. I knew he understood it. The music had stopped now. Completely. The room had gone still in a different way, no longer just curious, but aware that something was happening they could not explain. Victor straightened slightly, a subtle return of posture, of presence, of the man the world recognized. But it was not the same as before. It was quieter. More measured. "You believe this will change something," he said, almost thoughtfully. I held his gaze, unflinching. "I know it already has." Another pause. Then, slowly, deliberately, he reached for my hand. Not to control. Not to claim. Just to feel. His fingers brushed against mine, and for a second, it felt like the past and present collided in that single point of contact. His eyes dropped to the ring again, then back to me. "Claire had eyes like yours," he said quietly. I did not look away. "No," I replied, my voice steady. "I have eyes like hers." His fingers did not pull away immediately, and that alone told me more than anything he had said. Victor Hale was not a man who lingered without purpose. Every movement he made had always been precise, calculated, designed to reinforce control. But this was different. This was hesitation. This was something unfamiliar pressing against the edges of everything he believed he understood. His thumb shifted slightly against my hand, not enough to be noticed by anyone else, but I felt it. A subtle confirmation. A question he did not yet know how to ask. The room around us had gone completely still now, the kind of silence that feels heavy, like everyone is holding their breath without realizing it. They were waiting. For him. For the word that would decide everything. But Victor was no longer looking at the crowd. He was no longer aware of the ceremony, or the expectations, or the image he had spent a lifetime building. He was looking at me like I was the only thing that mattered. And in that moment, I was. "How long," he said quietly, his voice lower than before, stripped of its usual edge, "have you known?" It was not accusation. It was not anger. It was something far more dangerous. It was curiosity mixed with regret, with the slow understanding that this had not been an accident. I let a small breath escape, steady, measured, grounding myself in the reality of what this moment had become. "Long enough," I answered. His eyes narrowed slightly, not in suspicion, but in thought, in calculation reshaped by something more personal than strategy. "And you still walk down that aisle," he said. I nodded. I did. Another pause. But this one was different. It was quieter. Deeper. He was not trying to solve a problem anymore. He was trying to understand it. "Why?" he asked, and this time the word carried weight, real weight, the kind that does not belong in a business deal or a contract or a marriage arranged for convenience. I held his gaze, unflinching, letting the answer settle before I gave it to him. "Because you never came back," I said softly. The words landed between us with more force than anything else I had spoken. I saw it in his eyes immediately, the way something inside him shifted again, more sharply this time, like a memory finally finding its place. Not complete. Not clear. But close. Close enough to hurt. His grip on my hand tightened just slightly, not enough to restrain, not enough to control, just enough to hold on to something that felt like it might disappear if he let go. "I was not supposed to," he said, almost to himself, as if the statement had lived in him for years, unquestioned, unchallenged. I tilted my head just a fraction, studying him, seeing the man behind the legend for the first time. "That is the problem," I replied. "You were not supposed to forget either." His jaw shifted again, tension building beneath the surface, not explosive, not visible to anyone else, but I felt it. I saw it. The man who had built his world on moving forward, on leaving things behind, was now being forced to look back. And he did not like what he was finding there. The priest stepped forward again, his voice uncertain but persistent, trying to reclaim the moment, to pull us back into something simple, something structured. "Sir, do you take this woman?" Victor finally looked away from me. Not for long. Just long enough to acknowledge the room, the expectation, the eyes watching him. Then he looked back. At me. Always back to me. His expression had changed again, not softer, not weaker, but more defined, as if he had made a decision that no one else understood yet. "You planned this," he said quietly. It was not a question. I did not deny it. I did. His lips pressed together briefly, not in anger, but in acceptance of something he could no longer control. "To make me remember," he added. I nodded once. Yes. Another pause. And then, finally, he did something no one in that room expected. He did not pull away. He did not step back. He did not end it. Instead, he lifted his head slightly, his posture returning, his presence filling the space again, but not in the same way as before. This time, it was different. This time, it was personal. "Then you will stay," he said, his voice low, steady, carrying just enough for only me to hear. "Until I do." He said it like a condition, not a request, and for a second I almost forgot to breathe. Not because I was afraid, but because I recognized what it meant. Victor Hale did not bargain unless something mattered. And this mattered. His hand was still around mine, steady now, not searching anymore, not uncertain, just there, like he had decided something he was not ready to explain. Around us, the tension finally snapped into motion. The priest cleared his throat again, louder this time, pulling the ceremony back into place like nothing had fractured at all. "Sir, your answer," he repeated, voice careful but firm. This time, Victor did not hesitate. His eyes stayed on mine as he spoke, and when he did, the word was simple. "I do." The sound moved through the room like a release, soft murmurs rising, people shifting back into comfort, into understanding, into the illusion that everything was exactly as it should be. They did not know what had just changed. They did not know that this was no longer a transaction. This was something else entirely. I felt it in the way his grip remained steady, in the way his gaze did not break even as the priest turned to me. "And you?" I did not look away from him when I answered. "I do." The words left my mouth easily, too easily, like they had been waiting for years to be said. Not as a promise. As a declaration. The rest of the ceremony passed in fragments, sounds and movements that barely registered. Rings exchanged. Words spoken. Applause rising and falling like distant waves. But none of it felt real. The only thing that felt real was the shift between us, the silent agreement that had formed without anyone else noticing. When it was over, when the final words were spoken and the room began to move again, Victor did not release my hand. Not even when people approached. Not even when congratulations started to form around us, polite smiles and careful respect from men who would never meet his eyes for too long. He acknowledged them with a nod, a glance, just enough to maintain the image, but his attention always returned to me. Always. "We should leave," he said quietly, just for me, his voice carrying that same controlled calm, but now it held something else beneath it. Intention. I nodded once. Of course. The exit happened quickly after that. Efficient. Seamless. The way everything in his world moved. One moment we were at the altar, surrounded by people and expectation, and the next we were walking through a private corridor, the sound of the crowd fading behind us like it belonged to another life. My heels echoed again against polished floors, but this time, the sound felt different. Not like an entrance. Like a crossing. The doors closed behind us with a soft, final click, and the silence that followed was deeper than anything inside the cathedral. No witnesses. No audience. Just us. Victor stopped walking first. Slowly. Deliberately. I felt it before I saw it, the shift in his presence, the way the space seemed to narrow around him. I stopped too, turning just enough to face him fully. For a moment, he did not speak. He just looked at me, really looked this time, not as a stranger, not as a bride, but as something he was trying to understand in a way that went beyond control. "You knew what this would do," he said finally, his voice low, steady, but there was no accusation in it. Just acknowledgement. I held his gaze. Yes. Another pause. But this one was heavier. More personal. His eyes moved over my face again, slower now, more deliberate, as if he was allowing himself to see what he had avoided before. "And you still chose it," he added. I did not hesitate. "So did you." That made something shift in his expression, subtle, almost invisible, but I caught it. Not anger. Not resistance. Something closer to acceptance. He stepped closer then, not invading, not forcing, just reducing the space between us until the distance felt intentional rather than accidental. "This does not end here," he said. Quietly. It was not a warning. It was a statement. I met his gaze, steady, unwavering. It was never supposed to. The silence between us did not feel empty. It felt charged, like something waiting to unfold. Victor Hale had built his life on control, on knowing the outcome before the first move was made, but now he stood in front of me without that certainty, and I could see it in the way his eyes lingered just a fraction longer than they used to, in the way his breath slowed as if he were measuring something he could not yet define. He stepped past me without another word, but the space he left behind did not feel like distance. It felt like invitation. I followed. Of course I did. This was never about walking away. The hallway stretched long and quiet, lined with polished stone and soft lighting that made everything look untouched, pristine, like nothing complicated could ever exist here. But I knew better. So did he. His pace was steady, unhurried, but not relaxed. There was purpose in every step, not the cold precision I had expected, but something more internal, like he was thinking, replaying, remembering in pieces he could not yet put together. We reached the private exit, the doors opening before he even slowed, the outside air cool against my skin as we stepped into a world that looked exactly the same as before. Cars waiting. Drivers standing still. A life ready to continue as if nothing had shifted inside it. Victor paused beside the car but did not open the door. Instead, he turned slightly, not fully facing me, just enough that I could see the edge of his expression. "You said I never came back," he began, his voice quieter now, less controlled, like he was testing the words instead of commanding them. I did not interrupt. He did not need interruption. He needed space. "What makes you think I was supposed to?" he added, and this time there was something beneath it. Not defiance. Not denial. Something closer to uncertainty. I held his gaze, steady, unflinching. "Because she waited," I answered. The words were simple, but they carried everything behind them. Years. Silence. Absence that was never explained. His eyes closed briefly, not long enough for anyone else to notice, but long enough for me to understand that it mattered. That it reached something he had not allowed himself to revisit. "People wait for many things," he said, opening his eyes again, the familiar control starting to return, but not completely. Not like before. It does not mean they are owed anything. I stepped closer then, just one step, enough to shift the space between us again, enough to make sure he felt the difference. "She was not waiting for something," I said quietly. "She was waiting for you." That landed differently. I saw it in the way his posture tightened, not outwardly, not visibly to anyone else, but inside. A tension that had nothing to do with power and everything to do with memory. The driver opened the car door, silent, efficient, but neither of us moved. "Not yet." "And you?" Victor asked, turning fully now, his eyes locking onto mine again, searching, deeper than before, no longer just trying to recognize me, but trying to understand what I had become. "What are you waiting for?" I held his gaze, letting the question settle, letting it reach the part of me I had kept steady for so long. "The same thing," I said. No hesitation. No doubt. Just truth. Something shifted then, something small but undeniable. Not resolution. Not closure. But movement. The kind that cannot be undone once it starts. Victor studied me for a moment longer, and this time, there was no distance in his gaze. No barrier. Just recognition growing into something heavier. Something real. He gave a slight nod, almost to himself, like a decision had been made that he did not need to explain. Then, finally, he gestured toward the car. "Get in," he said, his voice calm again, but different. Changed. I did not argue. I did not hesitate. I stepped inside, the leather seat cool beneath me, the door closing softly behind me as he followed. The city moved outside the window as the car pulled away, lights blurring into long streaks of gold and white, but inside, everything felt still. He did not speak immediately. Neither did I. Some silences are not empty. They are necessary. After a moment, he reached into his jacket and pulled something out, something small, something familiar. The same kind of silver. The same worn edges. My breath did not catch, but it came closer than I expected. He held it between his fingers, studying it like he was seeing it for the first time in years. "I thought this was lost," he said quietly. I looked at it, then back at him. "Some things are not lost," I replied. "They are just left behind." The ring in his hand caught the passing streetlights, each flicker of gold reflecting across his fingers like a memory trying to surface. Victor did not look at me when he spoke again. He looked at the ring. Like it might answer something he could not. "I gave this away," he said quietly, almost to himself, like the admission was not meant for anyone else. I watched him carefully, not rushing, not pushing. Some truths need silence to become real. "You did," I said. "And you walked away before it could mean what it was supposed to." That made his jaw tighten, not in anger, but in recognition. The kind that does not come from being told, but from finally seeing something clearly. Outside, the city kept moving. Cars passing. Lights changing. People living lives that had nothing to do with this moment. But inside the car, everything had slowed again, just like at the altar, just like the second he lifted my veil. Only now, there was no audience. No expectations. Just truth, sitting between us whether he wanted it there or not. "I remember parts," he said after a moment, his voice lower now, less guarded. "Not everything. But enough to know this is not coincidence." I let that settle before I answered. "It was never supposed to be." His eyes shifted then, finally lifting from the ring to meet mine again. This time, there was no distance. No calculation. Just a man trying to understand the shape of something he had lost control over. "You built this," he said, not accusing, just stating it, like he was acknowledging the structure I had placed around him. "Every step." I nodded once. "Yes." Another pause. But this one felt different. Not tense. Not fragile. Something steadier. Like the beginning of something neither of us had planned, but both of us had stepped into anyway. He turned the ring slightly. Between his fingers, studying the worn edge, the faint scratches time had left behind. "Claire used to say that promises do not disappear," he murmured, the words sounding distant, like they had traveled a long way to reach him again. I did not interrupt. I did not need to. "She said they wait," he added. "Until someone is ready to face them." I held his gaze, steady, unwavering. "And are you?" I asked. The question did not demand an answer. It did not need one. It only needed to exist. Victor leaned back slightly, the movement subtle, controlled, but it carried weight. He was not avoiding the question. He was considering it. Really considering it. That alone told me everything had already changed. "I do not know yet," he said finally. Honest. For the first time since I had met him, truly honest. I nodded slowly. "Then we start there." His eyes searched mine again, deeper this time, not looking for answers, but measuring something else. Trust. Not given. Not earned. But possible. The car slowed slightly as it turned, the rhythm of the city shifting around us, but inside, the silence held. Not empty. Not cold. Just waiting. He looked down at the ring one last time before closing his hand around it, not hiding it, just holding it differently now. Like it mattered. "You said you wanted me to remember," he said quietly. I nodded. I did. He met my eyes again, and this time, there was something new there. Not power. Not control. Something quieter. Something real. "Be careful what you ask for," he said. I held his gaze, unshaken. "I already am." Another pause. Then something shifted, subtle but undeniable. Not an ending. Not even close. Just the first step in a direction neither of us could turn away from now. The car continued forward, carrying us into a future that no longer belonged to the world outside, but to the truth we had both chosen to face. And for the first time, I realized something I had not allowed myself to admit before. I did not just come here to make him remember. I came to see who he would become when he did.